Good rising, brethren. This is Big Judah, coming to you guys from California. Before I begin, give all praises to the Most High, Yahweh. Acknowledgement to the earthly mother. Who is wisdom? Who is the Holy Spirit? Acknowledgement to Yahweh Shai. I pray that the Most High blesses this lesson this afternoon, gives more knowledge and understanding of the events of the past, in order to understand the events that are currently happening on the earth, so we get a much better understanding of things that are soon to come on the earth. A little while ago, a video from khahndrop came up on my feed, and it went perfectly with a video that I was going to come up with, that I already had planned. So I'm going to leave the link to the video in the description box. But it's shows how, like, years ago, he brought out this information talking about how Columbus came here looking for Mount Zion here in the Americas and the Holy City. Most High, enlightened me to that. Yeah, a few years later on. Just shows how the Most High has been working throughout our nation with different brothers and sisters in order to bring this information out piece by piece. Many of us all have our pieces to the puzzle, and the Most High uses us at opportune times in order to bring those pieces together. I don't believe just one person has all of the information. I believe the Most High gives us all, our bits of information, our ways of helping, our ways of supporting this movement, in order for the Most High to be able to give the blessings that He's already set up for each of us. It's a really short video, really good video that khahndrop put out, and kind of just let you know how He's putting everything together. The lies that we've been told are so numerous and so in depth and so sinister that it takes many of us in order to be able to bring this information together. Now, a part that I'm going to add to this is the fact that the Vatican lets you know what it has hidden in the secret archives. Might not tell you exactly what is hidden in there, but you can figure it out by some of the things that they say in some of these books. Some of the books that we get, it might only have a couple of nuggets here and there, and we have to be, mindful that the Holy Spirit be sent to guide us to those certain parts of the puzzle. You can get an opportunity right now to see how this is all going to work out right now in this one book. How it's going to let you know that at the beginning, these Vatican archives had very little to no information, very little to no writings in them. And then all of a sudden, it seems there was an explosion of information. And I'm sure you're going to be able to figure out how slick they are, how they hide some of this information, and how they're slick with how, where they got this information from. So check this out. Today, we're going to be looking at this National Geographic inside the Vatican. Okay, we're going to go ahead and go up to around page 100, I think about 143. And we're just going to look here at the bottom. Actually, let's look at here. Today's signs requesting no talking keeps the Sistine Chapel relatively quiet, but it is still among the most visited sites in Rome. As many as 20,000 people file through it in a single day. The whole room, some 132 by 140 by 44 feet and taller than it is wide, remains the most famous single jewel of the Vatican collections. The art, books, artifacts, and documents that make up the collection are displayed throughout the Vatican chapels, galleries, and hallways, and in 14 museums, the secret archives, and the Vatican Library. Now check this part out. Many scholars call the 15th century humanist Pope Nicholas V the true founder of the Vatican Library. So this is around in the 1400s, okay? Excuse me. He loved manuscripts and collected hundreds of them, some dating from medieval times, when Nicholas died in 1455. An inventory listed some 1,200 manuscripts, 800 in Latin, 400 in Greek. So take a look at that inventory list. 1,200 manuscripts, 1,200 pieces of paper, 1,200 books. That was pretty much the Vatican Library in the 1500s and the 1400s. Not very many books, not a whole lot of information. Kind of crazy, right? So now let's take a look at what they're going to talk about within the Vatican. What kind of things are hidden there? Let's take a look at, let's see. Trying to find that here real quick. Here it is. First paragraph there at the top. The Vatican Library is one of the world's greatest repositories of medieval and Renaissance manuscripts and incunabula, books printed before 1501. That's kind of weird, but let's continue here. The Vatican was the world's intellectual switchboard at that time. How could it be a world switchboard and when you're only dealing with like 1,200 manuscripts? That means that they didn't have very much information, right? It says, let's see, notes Dr. Declan Murphy of the U.S. Library of Congress. It was the first institution to put knowledge at the service of government. Okay. We got 15th century sketches of now vanished Roman ruins, early maps, and manuscripts, even Greek and Roman coins. Okay, and whimsical medieval caricatures can all be found in the collection. And scholars are permitted to handle the rare books in a well-lighted reading room. We want people to feel welcome here, explains Father Leonard Boyle, the library's director. He was once a reader here himself. Now you got Pope Paul V, founded the Vatican archives in 1612. Though their primary purpose is as a repository for the popes, records and files, scholars are admitted by special permission for this decanting of history. As one cleric has called it, here is an abdication document of Queen Christina of Sweden, signed by her lords in 1654. Now, hold on, let's just stop right there. We got a lot of things talking about the 1500s, the 1600s, and things like that. As you can tell, you don't need 50 plus miles of shelving that they have now if you're only looking at the vast majority of medieval papers and things like that. The main thing I wanted to take a look at is this word right here, incunabula. Now, let's just take a look at the definition. All right. So, incunabula, an early printed book, especially one printed before 1501. Well, we know in 1455, they had their little information about what they had in there around about right here. 1400s, 1500s, says many scholars call the 15th century humanist Pope Nicholas V, the true founder of the Vatican Library. So this guy's the one that founded it, right? He loved manuscripts and collected hundreds of them. So he collected hundreds of them because he was such a great collector, I guess. Some dating from medieval times. Wow, that was such a long time ago. When Nicholas died in 1455. An inventory listed some 1,200 manuscripts, 800 in Latin, 400 in Greek. So around 1455, if you look at the inventory list, there's only 1,200 manuscripts. Not very many. So we already know that even before this, many of these people didn't read that much, didn't write that much, so didn't record that much. So 1,200, I guess for them, sounds like a huge amount of information. But what happened after 1492, people? The Most High let them come over here. And then all of a sudden, it seems like all of a sudden the Vatican libraries just grew like crazy. They're going to try to make it sound like, oh, well, look, these are the kind of things that we got into it. We got Queen Christina of Sweden. We got some documents signed by her lords in 1654 and authenticated by 306 seals. This still doesn't explain how you got 50 plus miles of books down there and artifacts all of a sudden. So, because in 1455, you barely had 1,200 manuscripts. You couldn't have that much more information going on. So there must have been some kind of an explosion of information that all of a sudden gets hidden in the Vatican archives. Something then that you're just getting information. Well, wouldn't it kind of make sense that if you come over to a new world that you haven't been to, and you supposedly burn all this information, which we know you didn't because you brought the calendar you took the calendar over to Europe, and you ended up finally getting your calendar straight based off the information you got here. So how many other things did you try to get straight by going through our records and then hiding the fact that you took our records back to your lands and reverse engineered things and made it seem like it was you that came up with it? But right here, you're telling on yourself. Right here, you're saying you had 1,200 manuscripts around 1455. So in thousands of years, talking about the Greeks and the Romans, you only had 1,200 manuscripts. Then all of a sudden, after 1492, after Cortez came over here, all of a sudden from the 1500s until now, you have 50 plus miles of information hidden in your archives. Where did all that information come from? If you could only manage to come up with around 1,200 manuscripts up until 1455. So after that, 500 years or so, 500 plus years after that, all of a sudden your information in your archives just exploded. Explain that to us. So you got these brethren who are always talking about, well, we want information. Why don't you prove to us about the book of Enoch? We want to see some information about what happened pre-antediluvian. And you guys don't prove anything. Well, now you guys are starting to see, they're telling you right here about this information. You got the Vatican Library is one of the world's greatest repositories of medieval and Renaissance manuscripts. Okay, so that's medieval and Renaissance. Then there's something else, and Incanubula books, okay, printed before 1501. Who had the vast majority of these books? Wouldn't that have been the Hebrews who would have given all this information? They were the ones that were keeping all this information. See, that's why it makes sense as to why they said anything pre-Columbian they did not accept. Well, they didn't accept it publicly, but they damn sure accepted it, on the down low. We know they took it back over there and reverse engineered it because they said they built an observatory in the Vatican. And if you look at the supposed observatory from a couple of videos back, how is that an observatory? A tower with some holes drilled into the walls. That's not an observatory. That's just, reverse engineering of our knowledge. So that's why it's important to take a look here at the Encanubilan, okay? An early printed book, especially one printed before 1501. Well, they can say 1501, but we know that they got information that was way more ancient than just that. And you look at the bottom. Early 19th century, from Latin, Encanubula, which means swaddling clothes or a cradle, okay? From in or into, kunua or cradle. So, so you're looking at, excuse me. So what you're looking at is ancient writings, things from the cradle of life. Who are the ones that were given the writing and knowledge and understanding from the beginning? The Hebrews. So when they're saying that it's information from the cradle, we know that they're talking about people who had the information from the beginning. That's talking about our people. So they have exactly what they have. They're telling you, but they're not going to tell you straight out. They have medieval and Renaissance manuscripts and writings from the cradle of life. The cradle of life is over here. The cradle of civilization is over here. So letting you know right there, they might not tell you straight out, but they got medieval writings, which is not very many, Renaissance writings, not very many, and Encanubula, books printed before 1501. So you can see they try to be slick with it and how they say these things. But we know they have their writings and they have the Hebrew writings. They have the Hebrew, they have our manuscripts. They have a lot of our archaeological information over there. And that's what they've been hiding in these places. And that's what they admit to it, or they're admitting to. They did not have the access to our information before 1501. They didn't get it until they got the chance to come over here. After they got their opportunity to come over here, they took our information and took whatever they could back over to their lands to reverse engineer and to make it seem as if they're the ones that have had this knowledge the entire time. But this is all very relatively new to them. Fast forward now until today. You're seeing an onslaught, the Most High destroying these churches, destroying these priests. Why is that? Because they have things, they've hidden things that do not belong to them. They've lied about everything. They lied about our people. They've lied about their people. They've lied about their lands. They lied about our lands. They've made it seem as if their lands, the little area over there in the so-called Middle East is the Most High's chosen land when his land is over here. They have a fake chosen people when the real chosen people are still being destroyed unto this day. So now when you sit there and look at these definitions, anything printed before 1501, we know that they weren't printing a whole bunch of stuff before 1501 because they didn't read that much. They didn't have a history. They didn't have much information. So we know then, and you look at the title, or you look at the definition of the word cradle, and the cradle, information from the cradle, we know that the Most High downloaded that information to his people. We also got the definition off of one of my older Bibles as well. And what does it say there? In canubula, right here. Latin prefix in the cradle, or from the cradle, okay, right there. Books printed during the early period of the art, generally confined to those which are printed before the year 1500. Okay, so we know that our writings were the ones that were much more in depth because we were led to get this information by the Most High. Remember now, they got over here and they take a look at all these pyramids. What do they say? They had all of this. They were all aligned to, not all, many of them were aligned to the stars, to planets, information they didn't have. So you know they had stuff written down. They had libraries written down, right? They couldn't believe that these people came up with, all over here in the Americas, all this information, all their sciences, all their math, knowledge, all that stuff, which was way more advanced than anything that they had seen. So now you're looking at things that were from the cradle, given to us by the Most High. Now it all starts to make even more sense as to why they've hidden, pretty much all the stuff here. They call them, they're over there in Egypt, well, in the so-called Middle East, those are called pyramids. But over here in the Americas, they call them mounds because they've been doing their best to hide the technological advancements that were over here. And they take that information and hide it in their Vaticans and their secret areas. Starting to make a lot more sense now. And they try to make it sound like the stuff before the 1500s, as if everything just started in the 1500s. We've been having this information for a long time, thousands of years. And now they're barely getting access to it, and they're trying to hide absolutely everything. So now, like I said, now you know that when they steal our information, just like they've stolen things from us before, they've taken a lot of our stuff, and now the Most High is punishing them for it. Eventually, everything is going to be given back to his chosen people. So yeah, it's all making sense. It's all starting to make sense. Just like the people who had stolen from us and were cursed, the same thing's going to happen again. They've stolen our information, hidden it from everybody, hidden it from the world, and now they're going to be cursed as well. All praise is to the Most High, Yahweh. Acknowledgement to the earthly mother, who is wisdom, who is Holy Spirit. Acknowledgement to Yahweh Shai. Shalom.